The 77th session of the United Nations General Assembly has begun in New York City. Today's event includes speakers from 15 countries such as Brazil, Turkiye, Qatar, Finland and France. Two issues are expected to dominate the talks: the global climate crisis and, of course, the war in Ukraine. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres began by talking about the grave situation that the world finds itself in. Listen in.
Our world is in peril and paralyzed. Geopolitical divides are undermining the work of the Security Council, undermining international law, undermining trust and people's faith in democratic institutions, undermining all forms of international cooperation. We cannot go on like this.
He had some strong words to say about climate change. His advice was to make the polluters pay.
It's high time to put fossil fuel producers, investors and enablers on notice. Polluters must pay. And today I'm calling on all developed economies to tax the windfall profits of fossil fuel companies. Those funds should be redirected in two ways: to countries suffering loss and damage caused by the climate crisis, and to people struggling with rising food and energy prices.
Meanwhile, Jordan's king spoke of the need for cooperation to combat climate change.
No country can heal our injured earth alone. We need global partnerships that can create real change. And Jordan is part of these efforts. We have been building strong partnerships to manage and sustain vital water resources. And we see more opportunities to work with partners to preserve precious World Heritage sites and natural wonders. The unique Dead Sea, the sacred Jordan River, and the resilient coral reefs of the Gulf of Aqaba, which are all threatened by climate change.
Meanwhile, Brazil's president chose to focus on religious persecutions during his speech. Take a look.
I wish to announce that Brazil is opening its doors to welcome the Catholic priests and nuns who have suffered cruel persecution from the dictatorial regime in Nicaragua. Brazil repudiates religious persecution anywhere in the world.
Besides climate change, the war in Ukraine is expected to take the limelight as the session unfolds. The annual UN session will be skipped by heads of states of India, China, Russia and Ethiopia. Joining us now is our correspondent Susan Teherani from New York. She is going to be getting us the latest updates. Susan, the UN chief has urged for taxes on fossil fuel companies feasting on profits as the planet burns. I'm obviously quoting him. Tell us more on that statement.
Priyanka, I'm sorry you broke up, but I think you're talking about the United Nations Secretary General's comment on climate, which a lot of his speech really focused on. He really was very straightforward. There was no sugarcoating in his speech, whether it was regarding climate or the economic disparities that the world is facing, which is related to climate change. He was, talking, he didn't pinpoint any particular country, but I think that in the days to come here at the United Nations, this really set the groundwork and the building block of what he's expected to talk about. And you played that soundbite of him calling on fossil fuel companies to really pay the price. I think that was a policy nugget that he wants to put forward for countries and for fossil fuel companies. That is going to possibly face pushback, considering the fact that there are fossil fuel companies that are moving towards green energy. They have the technology to work with governments and institutions to combat climate change. So many will come out and say this, instead of vilifying them, cooperate with them, and then go after countries like China, who are really the main polluters, and really join these treaties and then, promise to do something and then, wait until, years to come and then some emissions little by little, which doesn't really make sense. So, those are the discussions that we're going to have moving forward. But I think that Antonio Guterres, it's no surprise that he really focused a lot of his speech on climate as he...
Right. We'll try and get our correspondent Susan Teherani back on this broadcast as soon as possible. In fact, we've got her back on the line now. Susan, just following up to that, climate change, of course, dominated some of the commentary coming from the UNGA as global leaders took stage. Another topic, of course, was the Ukraine war. Now, the Turkish President Erdogan says that Vladimir Putin says he wants to end the war as soon as possible. Putin has earlier also alluded to the same when he sat down with India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. How is this comment being perceived?
Yeah, it was very interesting that Recep Tayyip Erdogan received applause after his address to the UN. He has really called for the cessation of violence. We had an opportunity to actually stop and speak with the foreign minister of Ukraine. He does not have an appetite to really, talk about any form of ceasefire with the Russians. He wants a full-on withdrawal from Ukraine on the part of Russia. So, while these countries on the sidelines are calling for that, then you have, countries like the United States, which are arming Ukraine to the teeth to defend itself from the Russian invasion. So you really do have two fronts and two competing solutions to the ongoing crisis that we're seeing develop around the world and these geopolitical challenges. And I think that those are the unsaid and less talked about challenges that world leaders will face during the GA77. Those competing thought processes on not only how to deal with the war in Ukraine, but this energy crisis that's the elephant in the room. You don't want to rely on Russian oil. You want to move to green energy. But on the other hand, there are blackouts in so many parts of the world. For example, South Africa, where his president can't even come and join the UNGA. And then, you have the Secretary General demonizing fossil fuel companies. So, yeah, a lot at stake here.
Absolutely. Susan, thanks so much for all those inputs and thanks for joining us on the broadcast. WION World is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.